Well, here we are. We've come back to Tredegar to see Dan Price, our client here, and this is the porcelain patio that we've laid. But what we've come back for today, we've put some grass on the side of the drive. We've got a tone more tegular driveway we've installed in a charcoal colour. But what I wanted to show you was this is the porcelain patio. This area had severe amounts of water, copious amounts of water that come down this wall and then go all the way around. But what we've done, the most important thing that you can do with any patio is to keep the water moving, and we have definitely kept the water moving in this case. The whole area is on bedrock, but we've made and corrected to the correct level, got to the correct level by using MOT type 1 and a lean mix as well. It's so important when you use a lean mix, it creates that rigid system and everything stays in place. But the water's moving on, they haven't had no problems at all. And I know that it's working well simply because, as our client has pointed out to us, that the grouting that we've done is consistent in colour. There's been a little bit of fading, he said, from what the original colour was, because no matter how dark you hope that it comes out, because this is like the dark grey, and we've put a little bit less, I think it's 900mm of water, and we tend to put about 875, 850 to reduce the water content, to increase the try and keep the colour consistent. And they haven't had no efflorescence. It is a little bit lighter than what it was when it first went in. That's why I always go for the dark coloured ground. But a few things to consider, and I've said this before on a checklist, and eventually I'll go through this in full, is that what you have to do prior to grouting your porcelain patio, you've got to make sure that your grout joints are actually removed from all debris, all foreign particles, soil, leaves. You see the leaves on here now. You want everything out. The only thing that you want in there is the bedding mortar that it's been laid on, okay? You've got to remove everything out. It's got to be nice and clean. And when you've done that and you've washed it and pressure washed it and made sure you've got that all out, you've got to let it dry. But what you can do the day before, or even on the day when you're actually grouting, you can get a leaf blower and make sure that it's dry. But remember, you can't see what's going on down in that joint when you're using a leaf blower. So you've got to make sure that you get down there and have a look and make sure that you keep drying it and give it some time. At least have a couple of days of dry weather. What you don't want is when you have a little bit of rain, the rain with porcelain is going to sit on the surface and then it's going to drop down into the joints and you're not going to see it. So you've got to make sure that you've got a leaf blower in the joints prior to grouting. We've used Easy Grout from Aspects with this product, with this patio, and as I've said before, it works. And it works for me, and it always has worked. There are some good products out there. There's BAL, there's Mapai, there's Flowpoint. There's loads and loads of different products out there you can use. But unfortunately, the only way to find out, no matter what you actually watch on YouTube videos or any on Instagram or any of the social media, is by doing it yourself and finding out. But there are checklists that you can actually do. Go for a popular brand that people are using, read the reviews on it. But I can say wholeheartedly that with this patio, as usual, the Easy Grout has worked for me. It's a slurry grout, and what it does, and it doesn't matter how good you are at paving and you get that bed correct right, what happens is the slurry grout gets down there and fills the joints up. The beauty of Easy Grout is that you don't have to wash it off like they do with Flowpoint. I'm always concerned when you're washing off with Flowpoint that it's going to go down and you've got to have a sump for all that water, that wastewater and all that debris to go down to clean up. And the other thing, of course, is unfortunately at this time of the year I have seen people using Flowpoint, and that's going to have a detrimental effect on your patio because water freezes. It may be the case now, it's mild, it's 5 and rising, okay, so we're not at freezing points, but the fact is during the night you'll have a period where you could get freezing. The temperatures can drop, can't they? Yeah, and they do drop. Like, so I wouldn't even use any water. What you've got to try and do when you're using any cementitious products, you've got to somehow reduce the amounts of water that you're using, because it's the water, of course, that freezes. And when you're doing your mixes, do the magic mix, do a screen mix. So when you squeeze it together, and it forms a ball, you know you got the right amount of water in there. We never ever quantify the water that we're putting in our mixes. And as Ryan and I we use that screed mix, and it works well for us. And the other thing, what I'm doing on the lean mix now is I'm putting a slurry on top of the lean mix before we put our bedding mortar in. So the bedding mortar has some cohesiveness between the bottom of the bedding mortar and the sub base. But if you look at this and just have a little walk through, you can actually see the joints are looking good. And unfortunately, the disadvantage of using porcelain, you do have those occasional chips, but that's when you've got to use those little 2-in-1 grinders and clean the edge up, and those pads as well, just to clean the edge of the porcelain up. So important. What else was I going to say? I was going to say the thing that you can actually do as well, that with your joints, what you can do to maintain the colour, you can use a sealer. So there's water-based sealers, but the unfortunate things about water-based sealers is that you only can apply like one coat, and it can be a couple of years before you put another coat on there. So you can put a solvent sealer, but you should always put a breathable sealer, a breathable water sealer or a breathable solvent sealer. And what happens is then when you use the sealers in there, it sort of seems that the joints go that little bit darker, and they don't go lighter as well because they've been sealed. It's like having, you know, when you seal sandstone, you have a lighter look when it's dried, and it's the same applies when you're doing with the cementatious joints, is that they will look darker, so they will look better. And for me, there are coloured grouts out there, but the thing is about the coloured grouts, you'll have all sorts of names out there, but when they get wet, they just look dark anyway. You don't really see the colour. And do you understand what I'm saying about the coloured grouts?
Yeah,
sometimes they don't. Yeah. When they get wet, you don't really see the colour in them, do you?
It's the same with everything. Once it just goes dark, every colour does, doesn't it?
Any observations about this now on here?
No, it looks really well. It's well done. I know I wasn't here because Dan was down for the grout. Yeah, but no, it looks good.
And the thing is, when we did the grouting, we used that Raymonde squeegee, but you could use another sort of, like you could even use a Veleda mop with it, like, you know. But you got to make sure is that they say that the surface has got to be a damp. Believe you me, you need very little amount of water to push the slurry around on the top, because what will happen is that the water that you put on the top when you sponge it over, make sure you wring it out and just give it a wipe, because otherwise what happens is you're adding water to the slurries, and that's going to weaken the slurry. You've got to make sure you try and reduce the amounts of water that you're using on the top. I think water can be problematic in so many cases. The thing I was actually saying to Ryan and our customer earlier on, Dan, was that it's amazing when you're using this and you're using porcelain, is that we look at it and we think it's a mill out. We look at it first, we think it's out, and then we measure it and it's a mill, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a mill. But right, do we walk round, like when we look at this now, we're not getting down on the ground and literally on our hands and knees looking at every...
No, of course you don't. You never do you?
No, not at all. Like, you know, so I like it. It's worked for me. And on here we had just the normal mitre, didn't we? The 45-degree mitre on here, and it was a lot easier than doing that L shape, wasn't it?
Massively.
Yeah. So, and as you can see, Dan's put this black pebble all the way around, and when they're wet, I'll tell you something now. Just stay there. I'm going to get the hose. And that's why. This is why I believe that these videos are really important. These videos is, if you look at this now, look at the colour of the contrasting picture frame and the pebbles and the main area. Now look at it. Look at the difference then when it's wet. It increases in its intensity in colour. And that's the point that I was making. Look at those joints now when they're wet. If you look over here, look at the joints now when they're wet. And that's the effect of a sealer, what that can actually do. Look at that. What you also got to remember is that when you're laying porcelain, it's outdoor tiling, and unlike when you're working indoors, you're not affected by, and I'm going to keep repeating this story, you're not affected by inclement weather conditions and what's in the ground and what's coming through the ground. Remember, with the water that's in the ground generally, there's things that are migrating through it, and they can have an effect on your paving. So if you are a contractor, you have to preemptively preempt the problems that can be created when you're doing this sort of product outside with any jointing, even if it's sandstone, or even if it's granite, or even if it's marble, that you're affected by weather conditions and what's in the ground. That's it for now. We've got another project we have to get on with. The other thing I was going to say, I should have said at the start of the video, please subscribe. We want to build the account. We want to get to 30,000, and it's slowly getting there, but we seem to get from 10,000 to 20,000 like that, and hopefully we'll have that surge again, so as the summer comes on. So subscribe, hit the notification button if you can, and just give it a like. Have a great day.